The vanished passenger. In the bleak darkness of midnight, a modern airport bustling with international travelers became the stage for an extraordinary event. Under the cold glow of neon lights and the sleek surface of glass and metal, the walls seemed to harbor years of sorrows and forgotten stories. That fateful night, amid the hustle and bustle of the crowd, a single passenger vanished without warning, a mysterious disappearance that unlocked dark secrets hidden deep within the terminal. During the peak of flight hours, a brief, eerie silence fell over the waiting area. Security cameras later revealed a peculiar gap in their footage, a moment where the passenger seemed to evaporate into thin air. As a gentle breeze swept through the corridors, stirring dusty old posters and stirring an inexplicable premonition among the staff, the atmosphere grew charged with unease. One vigilant employee, Mehmet, had been reviewing old records when he noticed subtle anomalies in the video, brief interruptions in which the passenger's image would inexplicably fade. Later that night, Ice, working at a remote corner of the terminal, recounted a chilling experience. While descending an elevator, she felt a delicate touch on her shoulder, only to find no one there when she turned around. Her trembling voice and haunted eyes lent weight to the unsettling tales whispered among those who had long been aware of the airport's darker history. Driven by a growing sense of curiosity and dread, Mehmet delved into the station's archival records. Amid faded documents and yellowed photographs, he uncovered evidence of a similar incident from 2 decades past. Back then, a mysterious figure known only as the missing passenger had disappeared on the eve of a flight, a case that had since transformed into one of the airport's most enduring legends. The archive files told a heartbreaking story of personal tragedy and lingering grief, a narrative so deeply etched into the building's history that it seemed to resonate with every cold, unyielding surface. In the days that followed, the airport's eerie happenings intensified. At midnight, empty corridors echoed with phantom footsteps, sudden drafts and distant, haunting melodies swept through the terminal, as if the very soul of the building was reawakening to relive its past torments. Passengers began to feel an inexplicable shiver run down their spines, and electronic devices malfunctioned without warning, plunging screens into darkness. It was as if the airport itself had come alive, resurrecting the spiritual echoes of pain and loss. Venturing deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, Mehmet found himself face to face with vestiges of a bygone era. In neglected waiting rooms and among stacks of old newspapers, he uncovered pages detailing the long-forgotten tragedy. Every word he read seemed to echo with the silent screams of those left behind, affirming that this disappearance was no random misfortune, but rather the re-emergence of long-suppressed anguish. In one particularly harrowing moment, Mehmet's footsteps echoed through a dim corridor, where shadows danced on the walls as if animated by unseen forces. At the end of the passage, an old door marked "Staff in Trance" beckoned him. Pushing it open, he stepped into an abandoned office filled with relics of the past, broken furniture, scattered files, and a faded portrait of the missing passenger. The face in the portrait, marked by both hope and deep sorrow, seemed to carry the weight of a life filled with silent suffering. Then, as the night deepened, Mehmet experienced the most chilling encounter of all. In a deserted wing shrouded in mist, a spectral figure emerged, a haunting semblance of the vanished passenger. With eyes brimming with unspeakable regret and a voice barely above a whisper, the apparition spoke, "I am the voice of the forgotten. I carry the weight of lost hopes and unhealed wounds. This airport is a sanctuary for our tears and our sorrows. My disappearance is a symbol of the pain and the forgotten moments buried here." In that surreal moment, the boundary between reality and the supernatural blurred completely. The terror of that night left an indelible mark on Mehmet. Every time he returned to the airport, he could feel the lingering presence of past tragedies echoing through every corridor and every door. The terminal was no longer just a place of transit, it had transformed into a repository of untold stories and immortal memories, a living monument to the pain of its former inhabitants. This haunting tale of the vanished passenger is not merely a ghost story but a profound reminder that some secrets, no matter how deeply buried, continue to whisper their sorrow through the passage of time. In every gust of wind and every shadow cast on the cold walls, the echoes of forgotten grief implore us, do not forget, do not ignore. Pre-flight nightmare, a terrifying night at the airport. It was past midnight when Daniel arrived at the sprawling international airport, a monolith of glass and steel that, under the cloak of darkness, transformed into a labyrinth of silent corridors and flickering lights. Expecting only the routine monotony of a long layover, he soon discovered that this night would unravel into something far more sinister. Daniel's flight was scheduled for the early hours of the morning, yet he found himself wandering a terminal that felt abandoned despite the soft hum of machines and distant echoes of voices. The usual bustle of travelers had vanished, replaced by an eerie quiet that pressed in on him from all sides. As he sat in a nearly empty lounge, the low murmur of the PA system began to distort into fragmented announcements in a language he couldn't quite place. At first, he dismissed it as a malfunction, a quirk of late-night maintenance, but a nagging sensation told him that something was very wrong. The terminal's design, with its long, reflective corridors and cavernous waiting areas, had always struck Daniel as modern and inviting. Tonight, however, the reflective surfaces revealed shadows that did not belong to any visible source. When he glanced up, he caught a glimpse of a pale figure disappearing around a corner. His heart pounded as he followed, driven by equal parts dread and curiosity. Venturing deeper into the maze-like passages, the silence broke intermittently with whispers, soft, unintelligible voices that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. In a deserted corner near Terminal B, he discovered an old notice board, faded and nearly forgotten. Tacked beneath outdated flight schedules was a brittle, yellowed leaflet describing a tragic accident from decades ago, a flight that never took off, whose passengers were lost in a mysterious disaster that had long been erased from official records. The names, dates, and cryptic messages hinted at a lingering presence, a group of souls forever trapped between life and death. A chill ran down Daniel's spine as he realized that the spectral murmurs might be more than just the echoes of a bygone era. Each whispered name he recognized from the leaflet felt like a personal summons from the void of time. He clutched the paper tightly, feeling as if it were a key to unlocking a secret that the airport itself had long concealed. Drawn by a force he could neither resist nor understand, Daniel made his way to Gate 13, a gate he had never noticed in any official terminal map. The door was slightly ajar, and a cold, unnatural draft seeped from the opening. With hesitant steps, he pushed the door and entered a dim waiting area bathed in an unearthly luminescence. Inside, the seats were arranged in neat rows, yet there was no sign of recent occupancy. Instead, faint silhouettes appeared intermittently in the reflections of the polished floor. As he approached the central information desk, the PA system crackled once more, and a voice, distant and melancholic, began reciting the names from the leaflet. Each syllable resonated like a dirge for lost souls. Before Daniel could process the sound, a figure materialized behind the desk. Clad in an old-fashioned uniform, with eyes that shone with sorrow and despair, the spectral attendant reached out a trembling hand as if pleading for release. "You must leave," the apparition whispered, its voice barely audible over the hum of the terminal's machinery. "This gate, this flight, it is not meant for the living." Despite the warning, a desperate need to understand pulled Daniel further into the mystery. He began to piece together the fragments of history embedded in the airport's silent corridors. In a forgotten archive room behind a locked door, he uncovered dusty records, photographs, and personal belongings of the lost passengers. Their lives, full of hope and dreams, were cut short by an inexplicable catastrophe, a calamity that had left an indelible scar on the very foundation of the airport. As he pored over the evidence, the lights began to flicker, and a palpable tension filled the air. The terminal seemed to breathe, its walls pulsating with a dark energy. Every creak of the structure echoed like a heartbeat, and the line between the physical and the paranormal blurred. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, and every step he took seemed to summon another specter from the past. In one particularly harrowing moment, Daniel found himself isolated in an endless corridor, where the temperature dropped sharply and his breath came out in visible puffs. The voices grew louder, more insistent, forming an incoherent chorus that clawed at his sanity. Panicked, he tried to retrace his steps, but the terminal's layout now seemed to shift and change, as if it were a living maze determined to trap him forever. In a final bid to escape, Daniel rushed toward what he hoped was the exit. But instead of finding salvation, he reached a boarding gate illuminated by a solitary, flickering bulb. The digital display on the gate read Flight 13, boarding in bold letters. The number 13, a harbinger of misfortune in many cultures, sent a shiver down his spine. He glanced around, desperate for any sign of normalcy, but found none. The terminal had transformed into a twilight zone where time and space no longer obeyed the rules of reality. Suddenly, the spectral attendant reappeared beside him, her eyes filled with sorrow and a deep, unspoken regret. "This flight is the final journey," she murmured. Not one of escape, but of release from this eternal limbo. A low rumble filled the air as if the building itself were protesting. The ground trembled underfoot, and the walls began to bleed with shadows. In that surreal moment, Daniel realized that the flight wasn't a means of departure, it was a passage. The lost souls, the echoes of tragedy, and the sinister presence that haunted the terminal were all bound to this ghostly departure. With no other recourse and the terror of being trapped in a nightmare that defied logic, Daniel stepped forward. The gate's door swung open, revealing a dark, endless aisle that led to an aircraft suspended in midair. Its fuselage was shrouded in mist, and the windows glowed with an unearthly light. It beckoned him with a promise of oblivion. As the heavy door closed behind him, the cabin filled with the spectral figures of the lost passengers, their faces etched with both relief and eternal sorrow. The aircraft's engines roared to life, yet no runway or tarmac could be seen outside the windows, only a void of endless night. In that moment, Daniel understood that he had become part of the very nightmare he had sought to escape. Morning light would eventually break over the city, but the airport remained shrouded in mystery, a place where the living and the dead converged in a perpetual twilight. Travelers who arrived on later flights spoke in hushed tones of strange occurrences, of ghostly figures wandering the corridors, of announcements in unknown languages, and of a boarding gate that appeared only on the darkest of nights. For Daniel, the memory of that night became a relentless echo, a constant reminder that some journeys have no destination, that some flights never truly depart. His soul, now intertwined with the spectral chorus of lost travelers, would forever wander the endless terminal, a cautionary tale for those who dared to challenge the boundaries between reality and the realm beyond. In the silent corridors of that cursed terminal, every traveler's shadow might just be a harbinger of the nightmares that lie in wait. The abandoned terminal, a place no one should be. A heavy mist had begun to settle over the outskirts of the long-forgotten town, blanketing the landscape in an eerie shroud. Beneath a bruised twilight sky, the terminal, once a bustling hub of travel and hope, stood desolate and decaying, its grand arches and once proud facade now marred by time and neglect. It was a place whispered about in hushed tones, a forbidden relic of past tragedies and inexplicable phenomena. No one in their right mind would dare cross its threshold except those with a hunger for the unknown. Alex Mercer had always been drawn to mysteries. A seasoned documentarian with a penchant for the paranormal, he had explored haunted mansions, abandoned asylums, and cursed battlefields. Yet, none had captivated him quite like the legend of the abandoned terminal. Rumors spoke of ghostly apparitions, inexplicable sounds, and an oppressive feeling that invaded even the bravest of souls. Despite repeated warnings, Alex felt an irresistible pull, as though the terminal itself beckoned him to uncover its secrets. With his camera gear packed and a notebook filled with fragmented local lore, Alex set out on a stormy evening. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of dead trees, and every step closer to the terminal was met with an unsettling mix of anticipation and dread. As the massive wrought iron gates creaked open at his touch, he couldn't help but wonder, had he just sealed his fate? The terminal's history was as murky as the fog that enveloped it. Once, it had been a vibrant nexus of journeys and goodbyes, a place where travelers embarked on new adventures and departed with tearful promises. Yet beneath the bustle and fervor lay an undercurrent of despair. In the throes of an unknown catastrophe decades ago, a terrible accident claimed the lives of countless souls. Some said that the terminal had absorbed their anguish, trapping their spirits in an endless cycle of sorrow. Others whispered that dark forces, born of grief and betrayal, had been awakened, forever staining the building with their malevolent energy. Every corridor and waiting hall was laden with spectral remnants, a flicker of movement in the corner of one's eye, a distant echo of laughter turned to sobs, and the persistent feeling of being watched. Alex's research had revealed conflicting accounts, but one truth was irrefutable: the terminal was not merely abandoned, it was alive with memories and restless energies. Stepping into the vast main hall, Alex's footsteps echoed against cold, marble floors cracked by the relentless passage of time. The grand clock, its hands frozen at a time long past, loomed above as a silent witness to the terminal's decay. Dust motes danced in the weak beams of his flashlight, and every shadow seemed to move with a life of its own. As he moved deeper into the building, the temperature dropped drastically. His breath came out in invisible puffs, and an overwhelming sense of foreboding settled in his chest. The silence was punctured by sporadic, almost rhythmic thuds, like the slow, deliberate heartbeat of the terminal. At first, Alex dismissed them as the building's settling, but soon the pattern grew unnervingly deliberate. Following the sounds, he found himself before a grand staircase that spiraled downward into a labyrinth of darkness. The air grew thick, and the walls seemed to pulse with hidden sorrow. With each step, the oppressive weight of unseen eyes pressed upon him, and the distant hum of despair grew louder. In the subterranean levels of the terminal, the atmosphere transformed into something otherworldly. The corridors were narrow and claustrophobic, lined with peeling wallpaper and the remnants of old advertisements hinting at better times. Here, the whispers began, faint voices carried on the stale air, their words indistinct but laden with profound sadness. Alex paused, straining to decipher the murmurs that ebbed and flowed like tides, at times clear enough to seem like desperate pleas for salvation. As he advanced, his camera captured fleeting glimpses of figures standing at the periphery of the light, ethereal silhouettes draped in tattered clothing, their faces obscured by darkness. One such figure, a woman with sorrowful eyes, seemed to drift toward him. Her lips parted in a silent cry, beckoning him to follow. In that moment, Alex's logical mind wrestled with the inexplicable. Was this a trick of the light, a hallucination born of isolation, or something far more sinister? Compelled by equal measures of dread and empathy, he followed her down a corridor leading to a long-forgotten waiting room. The room was arranged as if time had frozen on the day of the tragedy. Dust-covered benches, scattered belongings, and a tattered newspaper headline reading "Tragedy Strikes at Midnight Terminal" spoke of a catastrophe that had sealed the fate of many. In the dim light, Alex could almost see the echoes of frantic farewells, the despair of families, and the terror of those trapped within those very walls. At the center of the waiting room, an ancient record player sat atop a battered table. Against all reason, it began to play on its own, emitting a scratchy, melancholic tune that resonated with the deep-seated pain of the terminal, filling the void with a haunting lullaby. As the melody swirled around him, Alex was overcome by a sudden vision, a torrent of images flooding his mind. He saw a time when the terminal was vibrant, bustling with life and hope. Yet as the vision shifted, the happy scenes gave way to chaos. In the midst of a busy evening, a series of unexplained events unfolded: a mysterious fire, sudden blackouts, and inexplicable disappearances. Panic ensued, and amidst the turmoil, people began to vanish without a trace. Their desperate cries for help echoed in the halls, merging with the plaintive melody of the record player. The vision intensified. Alex saw the woman from the shadows, her eyes filled with unbearable grief, reaching out to a man who had once been the terminal's caretaker. In that moment, a surge of dark energy tore through the building, and the terminal became a nexus for lost souls, trapping them in an eternal cycle of anguish. As the vision subsided, a piercing coldness settled in his heart. The terminal was not simply haunted by memories, it was an active participant in their suffering. Determined to unearth the truth, Alex ventured further into the depths of the terminal. In a secluded archival room, he discovered brittle documents and faded photographs chronicling the terminal's final, fateful days. The records spoke of strange occurrences, unexplained lights in the dead of night, machinery that operated without power, and the haunting absence of certain individuals. Each piece of evidence painted a portrait of despair and an inexplicable malevolence that had gripped the terminal. Yet, as Alex pored over these relics, the terminal's presence grew increasingly invasive. The air itself seemed to throb with anticipation as shadows converged around him. A low, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the floorboards, as if the building were alive and breathing. The boundary between past and present blurred, and Alex found himself caught in a relentless tide of emotions and visions that defied explanation. As midnight approached, the terminal's power reached its zenith. The walls vibrated with the intensity of accumulated sorrow, and the whispering voices crescendoed into a cacophony of wails. In the heart of the building, in a vast hall where sunlight once filtered through stained glass windows, the terminal's curse revealed its final, horrifying secret. Before Alex's eyes, spectral figures materialized in full force, surging forward like a tidal wave of despair, their eyes vacant yet brimming with unspoken terror. The woman's ghost, now unmistakably real and desperate, cried out to him in a brittle mixture of warning and plea. "You must leave," she whispered, her tone laden with resignation rather than hope. Yet as Alex turned to flee, the terminal itself seemed to conspire against him. Corridors twisted into endless loops, staircases spiraled into infinity, and every door led to another chamber of unspeakable torment. It became clear that the terminal was not merely a building, but a living prison, a labyrinth designed to ensnare the unwary and devour their sanity. Desperation overtook reason as Alex fought to navigate the shifting maze. Every step was a battle against the overwhelming force of grief and terror permeating the air. The walls, etched with cryptic symbols and desperate messages from lost souls, bore silent witness to his struggle. In a final, heart-stopping moment, he reached what appeared to be an exit, a door bathed in an eerie, pulsating light. With trembling hands, he pushed it open, only to be met by an inescapable void that seemed to swallow his very essence. As he was drawn into the darkness, his final thought was a mix of regret and the haunting realization that some places are abandoned for a reason, and some mysteries are best left unsolved. In the weeks that followed, local legends of the abandoned terminal grew ever more potent. Travelers and thrill-seekers who dared to approach its foreboding gates reported eerie sounds and fleeting glimpses of a solitary figure wandering its corridors. Some claimed that on stormy nights, if one listened carefully, they could hear the desperate echoes of a man pleading for escape from a place that had long consumed him. The terminal stood as a chilling reminder that the past is never truly gone. It lingers in the spaces we forsake, in the silence between heartbeats, and in the shadows of forgotten dreams. And while the outside world moved on, the souls trapped within its walls continued to wander, bound by a curse that defied time and reason. For Alex Mercer, the journey had been a cautionary tale. His once insatiable curiosity had led him to a place where reality twisted into nightmares, where hope was swallowed by despair, and where the line between life and death blurred into an eternal dusk. The abandoned terminal was not merely a relic of the past, it was a living monument to the tragedies of human existence, a stark reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. As the terminal waits silently in the mists of time, its legacy endures, a tale of sorrow and terror whispered on the wind, inviting only the bravest or the most foolhardy to step inside. For those who dare to enter, remember this: there are places in the world where darkness never fades, where every echo is a lost soul's lament, and where you may become part of the story yourself. The end.